What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Tonight we will be delving into 27 horrifying holiday true crime stories. My apologies for my voice that is not completely healed yet from having the flu a couple of weeks ago. But thank you all for joining me, and here we go. The tragic Christmas Eve, the unsolved case of Gianni Belvedere. On December 23rd or early December 24th of 2013, Gianni Belvedere was waiting in his car in a Macy's parking lot, chatting on the phone with his cousin. He was there to pick up his fiancée, Iona Flint, who was finishing her shift at the store, bustling with last-minute holiday shoppers. This ordinary act of love and routine was about to turn into a horrifying tragedy. Without warning, a man approached Gianni's car. This man was Carlo Mercado. In a shocking and senseless act, Mercado shot and killed Gianni, then took his car. Mercado's actions didn't stop there. He drove the stolen car to his house, even stopping to fill it with gas before returning to Macy's for his broken-down motorcycle. At Macy's, a grim discovery awaited Iona Flint and Gianni's brother, Sal. They were searching for Gianni, hoping for any sign of him. They saw his car, but their relief turned to horror when they realized it wasn't Gianni at the wheel. In a cruel twist of fate, Mercado killed them both. Gianni Belvedere, age 24, was considered a missing person until his body was found in Riverside weeks later on January 17th of 2014 in the trunk of his green Toyota Camry. The police eventually arrested Mercado, but the motive behind these brutal killings remained a mystery. Mercado, who had never met his victims, did not explain. A theory surfaced about a possible connection to a road rage incident, but ultimately remained unconfirmed, and Mercado remained silent. The authorities labeled this horrifying series of events as a random act of violence, a label that does little to ease the pain and loss felt by those who knew and loved Gianni, Iona, and Sal. The missing Sodder children. On Christmas Eve in 1945, 5 children from the large Sodder family disappeared and were never seen again. Their family home in Fayetteville, West Virginia, was the site of a huge fire, and while parents George and Jenny and 4 of their children managed to escape the burning building, 5 of their children were unaccounted for, and their remains were never recovered. They were 4-year-old Maurice Sodder, 12-year-old Martha, a strange and upsetting twist of events, a significant amount of unexplained problems arose when George Sauter tried to rescue his children, including a ladder being missing, windows not opening, and no operator at the fire station working that night. How the fire started and what happened to the Sauter children remains unknown today, but according to several true crime podcasts, such as Case File True Crime, a possible motive relates to George's criticism of Italian fascist leader Benito Mussolini. George was an Italian immigrant, and his opposition made him a vulnerable target of the Sicilian mafia. George demolished the house before it could be established whether his children were dead or missing. According to the Smithsonian, the surviving Sauter family believed for the rest of their lives that their relatives had survived the fire. A billboard was erected in the 1950s with images of the children, and a reward was offered for information. It remained standing until Jenny Sauter's death in 1989. The murder of Paul Logan. On December 23rd, 1993, Paul Logan was at work as a Chinese food delivery driver in Black Hill County, Durham, in England, when he was called to deliver an order to Blue House Farm. When Logan arrived at the farm, the dad of two was told no food order had been placed by the homeowners, and he headed back to his car. Sorry guys, hang tight. Sorry about that, I had to clear my throat. The owners at Blue House Farm raised the alarm when they noticed his white car was still sitting at the end of the lane to their home later that evening. When police arrived, they searched the area and uncovered Logan's body. He had been bludgeoned to death. Today, his family is still searching for answers. In 2021, Northumbria Police reviewed the case, and Detective Superintendent Ian Sharp told the British news outlet Chronicle Live that his team had interviewed 2,271 people, taken 903 statements, and followed up on 1,796 lines of inquiry. I'm keeping an open mind about why Paul was killed, Sharp said. This murder was pre-planned and well organized in such a way that it is extremely unlikely the killer was acting alone. It's probable that at least two people, possibly more, were involved. The Christmas Tree Lady. On December 18th of 1996, a woman who became known as the Christmas Tree Lady was discovered dead, lying on a plastic sheet in Annandale, Virginia, at the Pleasant Valley Memorial Park Cemetery. She was approximately 60 years old and had never been identified. almost 2 decades, nobody came forward to identify Jane Doe, and the motivation behind her death remains unknown. DNA and genealogy research led to the Christmas tree lady being identified. She was Joyce Marilyn Meyer Summers, originally from Davenport, Iowa. She was the oldest of 5 siblings, according to DNAsolved.com. At the time of her death, Meyer had not been reported missing and did not have family in the immediate area. Relatives had hired a private detective to look for her, but had no success. Ed and Minnie Morin. It took more than 2 decades to find out what happened to the elderly couple, Ed and Minnie Morin. On Christmas Eve, 1985, the couple's bodies were found in a woodland after they had been shot in the head near their home in Ethel, Washington. It was not until 2012 their family finally got justice when witnesses came forward with evidence. But for years, the couple's unexplained death baffled authorities. An investigation in the 2010s discovered the Morins had been kidnapped by Rick Rife and John Gregory, notorious drug dealers in the local area, who forced them to withdraw $1,500 in cash. They were then driven to the woods and shot in their car. Unfortunately, witnesses did not come forward, fearing retribution from the men. But years later, Rick and John Gregory were picked up out of a lineup by witnesses who had seen them driving the Morins' car. John Gregory died before he could be arrested, but Rick Rife was charged with 2 counts of murder in the first degree, 2 counts of robbery in the first degree, and 1 count of burglary. Wow. You guys know where I was going with that. In the first degree. He was found guilty and sentenced to 103 years in prison. The 10-year-old killed after Christmas. On New Year's Eve, 10-year-old Keith KJ Frierson asked his mother if he could play with the new bike he received for Christmas. While outside, he was approached by another 10-year-old boy who had gone to fetch his father some cigarettes from the car. However, he also retrieved his firearm. According to the Sacramento County Sheriff's Office, the boy then bragged about his father having a gun and fatally shot KJ. Abandoned toddler. Jackson Police Chief Joseph Wade said 1-year-old prodigy Hunter was found with a massive amount of trauma and bruises to the body off the front step of a Jackson resident. They called the police after Herman Coleman allegedly brought the child to the neighbor to report he was having trouble breathing and eating. Eventually, the police said Coleman left the baby with the neighbor, who called the police police. After being transferred to the hospital, he died upon succumbing to his injuries. The chief said the boy's mother, Yolanda Hunter, was brought to the station for questioning and charged with felony child abuse the following day, but was released from jail after making bail. The two are currently on the run from capital murder charges. Mother's call for help gone wrong. Instead of wrapping presents or decorating a Christmas tree, 27-year-old Nina Finlayson called the police on December 4th to report a domestic dispute with her ex-boyfriend. According to a statement from the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department, the dispatcher recalled hearing screams and the sounds of a struggle in the background while on the phone. Officers said they located Finlayson inside the home with her 9-year-old daughter, armed with a knife, threatening to stab her ex-boyfriend. Her family said she was armed to protect herself because the man has injured her and her daughter in the past. However, police claimed that Finlayson allegedly walked toward the man with a knife, and one responding officer fired several times at her. She died on the scene. Killing of Kashmir James. On Christmas Day in 2010, Kashmir James was shot 9 times right in front of her 3-year-old daughter, Nevaeh, after just stepping out of her car. Police say 3 gang members were identified as suspects and believed to mistake James for someone else. The trio was charged with murder and attempted murder. In a news conference following the shooting, Nevaeh told the world, "Please help my mommy." She also testified at their trial in 2015, asking the men why they haven't apologized for taking her mother away and saying she's still frightened from that night. "You are supposed to love people, not hurt and kill them," she said. 2 of the men received life sentences, and the third, 40 years to life in prison. The Dayton, Ohio Christmas killing spree. On Christmas Eve of 1992, Marvelous Keene, Heather Matthews, DeMarcus Smith, and Lua Taylor, a group of runaway teenagers nicknamed the Downtown Posse, brought terror to Dayton, Ohio. They launched a killing campaign. They shot and killed a General Motors worker, a teenager using a payphone, another teen who was the ex of one of the posse's members, and then a mother who was working at a mini-mart. Most of the victims were looted of their money, belongings, or vehicles. The day after Christmas, the crew was approached by Dayton police sergeant who noticed their car was stolen. Upon being arrested, they confessed to killing 2 more people. The teens were all handed life in prison except one. Keene was sentenced to death and executed in 2009. was killed on Christmas Day in 2016 when she crossed paths with a homeless man in Washington, D.C. Investigators say the man, Dwayne Johnson, climbed into Macaulay's vehicle where he beat and raped her before strangling her to death. Johnson pleaded guilty to first-degree murder and was sentenced to 30 years in prison. Really, 30 years, that's all he got. The justice system, unbelievable. Okay, on to the next case. Stephanie Kilhefner. Dustin Lee Klopp took his two small children to celebrate Christmas with his parents in 2014. And then he called the police to confess that he'd killed his wife, Stephanie Kilhefner, the night before and placed her body in a shed on their property. On Christmas Eve, Klopp reportedly punched Kilhefner, slit her throat, and then struck her several times with an axe. The 36-year-old died by suicide in his jail cell in March of 2015. The Dallas Christmas Killings. Killer Santa Aziz, and I'm gonna really butcher this last name, guys, Yazdanampana. I'm so sorry, I know I totally fucked that one up. Who donned the festive red and white outfit in anticipation of his rampage on December 25th of 2011, entered his estranged wife's Dallas, Texas home and began shooting the family. They had just finished unwrapping presents. All in all, he murdered 6 people, including his wife and 2 children, before killing himself. The victims and 2 handguns were discovered in the kitchen and living room, with presents and wrapping paper littering the floor. Aziz had been dealing with financial and marital issues, which detectives believe contributed to his mindset before the murder-suicide. Like the Covina case, which we'll get to later, it's likely the suicide was a last-minute decision when the killer found himself overwhelmed. The crime scene showed attempts by Aziz to frame his brother-in-law by placing one of the guns in his hand. According to Carr, people who commit violent acts during the holidays are often consumed by feelings of rejection, usually by a love interest or former lover, or even just someone they've been flirtatious with. Typically, they targeted their victim specifically, and their violence is a direct expression of their frustration, anger, hate, or rage toward that person. These attackers are often fixated on the fantasy of holidays being synonymous with love, family, and fun. They believe their intended victim to be the reason they are suffering and deprived on an ideal holiday. The Lawson family murders. On Christmas Day in 1929, tobacco farmer Charlie Lawson killed his wife and all but one of his 7 children at his Germantown, North Carolina home. Just days days after getting the family together for an expensive family portrait, and shortly after he and his eldest son Arthur went hunting, Lawson hid by the barn and ambushed two of his daughters, shooting and then bludgeoning them. Walking back toward the house, he killed his wife on the porch and then hunted down his oldest daughter and two youngest sons, who were hiding inside. Then he went into the woods, where he killed himself. The sole survivor of the massacre was Arthur, age 16, who had gone into town for some extra ammunition after their morning hunt. Although we still don't know why Lawson killed his family, the murders in general are more likely to be committed by someone in the victim's family than by a stranger. People who murder their family or a family member during the holidays are likely to have repressed anger, harbored hostility, jealousy, or frustration with that family member or what they represent. Because the holidays are expected to be happy times and family-filled, unhappy family members may experience a psychological break where they can no longer repress uncomfortable thoughts or feelings of rage. Murders of this type are often reactive and unplanned. The case of the so-called stolen chocolate. A man dressed as Saint Nick at the Atlanta Mall in Georgia lost his patience in the worst way in 2004. His temper got the best of him, and he allegedly began to hit an elderly 74-year-old woman with a 2x4, convinced she had stolen more than $100 worth of Hershey's chocolate from him. The woman died from injuries in the hospital, and Clark was sentenced to life in prison for committing one of the most disturbing Christmas crimes in the state of Georgia. The case of a Santa Claus burglary. A visit from Santa is usually a joyous occasion, especially when he's collecting for charity. A 22-year-old woman living in Birmingham, Alabama, thought this was the exact scenario when a man dressed as Santa knocked on her door. Unfortunately, his intentions were much darker. He hit her in the face before attempting to rob her home. He fled the premises shortly after. The case of the most infamous Christmas bank robbery. This crime is almost 100 years old, but it's still quite baffling. In fact, it's considered to be one of the most notorious robberies in history. A man by the name of Marshall Ratliff walked into Cisco's First National Bank in a full Santa costume. Accompanied by 3 armed men, he was able to escape with the money, taking 3 girls hostage. His car ran out of gas shortly after, and he had to abandon his loot. He was arrested and sentenced to 99 years in prison, but an angry mob invaded the prison and lynched him. That happened in the state of Texas. Sorry, that was loud. The case of the Italian Hall disaster. The 1913 Italian disaster might have happened over a century ago, but it's a tale that continues to cause despair. It was Christmas Eve in Calumet, Michigan, when a group of striking mine workers and their families were gathered for the holiday. An unidentified person falsely yelled out "fire," and the result was disastrous. During the evacuation of the building, a stampede ensued, killing 73 people. The case of the most unusual Christmas gift. Parents can sometimes be at a loss when it comes to finding the perfect gift for their children. A man in Sidell, Louisiana, thought he had the perfect solution. Police reports state that he robbed a pet store, taking the cash register and a couple of snakes. When he was asked by police why he committed the crime, he said it was for his son's Christmas present. Yikes. Okay, this case is actually real messed up, and maybe in another video I'll go into more detail on this one. But this is the brutal murder of Tammy Homolka by the Ken and Barbie killers. Paul Bernardo and Carla Homolka. These guys were terrible. I'm not sure if any of you all have heard this case. You probably have if you love true crime. Christmas is a time for family, but Carla Homolka took that to a sick extreme when she agreed to help her fiancé, serial rapist Paul Bernardo, assault and ultimately kill her 15-year-old sister Tammy on December 23rd of 1990. By that point, Bernardo was known to police in Ontario, Canada, as the Scarborough rapist, though he had not yet been identified. Bernardo had raped or attempted to rape at least 19 women when he met Carla during his spree, and she indulged many of his dark desires. But after the couple got engaged, Bernardo confessed that he was bored with their sex life and disappointed that Carla hadn't been a virgin when they met. So the couple came up with a twisted solution. They decided to rape Carla's younger sister Tammy during their family's 1990 Christmas party. Carla, who worked in a veterinary clinic, spiked Tammy's drink with animal anesthetics. When the rest of the family went to sleep, she held a cloth soaked with halothane over Tammy's mouth and then took turns raping her with Paul, a brutal sexual assault that was captured on the couple's video camera. was sentenced to life in prison, Carla made a deal with the prosecution and was released in 2005. The Christmas murder of Zazel Preston. On Christmas morning in 2011, Zazel Preston's children gathered around the tree in their Anaheim, California home and found their mother slumped on the couch wearing sunglasses. Her husband, William Wallace, allegedly told the children that Mommy had gotten drunk and ruined Christmas. In fact, Wallace had killed her the night before and then propped her up on the couch to fool their children. As the New York Post reported, Wallace and Preston attended a Christmas Eve party together on December 24th before getting into an argument at home. Neighbors heard them shouting, and Wallace allegedly told one of Preston's relatives, "We were drinking, and during the argument, I tossed her around a bit." The next morning, Wallace brought Preston out of their bedroom and set her up on the couch as Preston's two children opened presents. "Mommy ruined Christmas. She got drunk and ruined Christmas," he allegedly told them. Police were called to the house where they found Preston dead and clear evidence that she and Wallace had had a violent argument. According to the New York Post, investigators found blood throughout the apartment, holes punched into the walls, and a door that had been yanked off its hinges. Though Wallace claimed that Preston had gotten drunk, tripped, and fallen onto a glass table, he was found guilty of second-degree murder and sentenced to 15 years in prison. Preston's mother, Sidel, accused him at his sentencing of not only beating and torturing Preston, but also mentally assassinating her children by pretending she was still alive. Can you imagine being so fucked up that you kill the mother of your kids and then prop her up on the sofa with her sunglasses on? Whoa. This is the case of Samina Imam, the woman murdered on Christmas Eve by her lover. On Christmas Eve in 2014, 34-year-old Samina Imam excitedly set out to meet her boyfriend, Roger Cooper. He'd promised to leave his long-term partner for her and take her to Malmaison Boutique Hotel to celebrate the holidays. Instead, with the help of his brother, David, Cooper killed her. Imam and Cooper met while working at Costco in Coventry, England. Though Cooper had a long-term partner and was involved with a third woman. What a guy. He and Imam had struck up a relationship. As things got serious, however, she demanded that he leave his long-term partner for her. To her face, Cooper agreed to do so, but behind her back, he began to plot Imam's murder with David. They texted using Star Wars references to conceal their true intentions, and according to Vice, even embarked on a failed attempt to kill her on December 12th of 2014. On December 24th of 2005, chemicals like arsenic and mercury. When Imam failed to appear for her family's Boxing Day dinner on the day after Christmas, they notified the police. Investigators soon tracked Samina's cell phone data to the brothers' home and to David's house, where they found a bottle of Bellini that Samina had purchased in his fridge. Oh, I'm sorry guys, I totally misread that. Cell phone data was linked to David's house, who was the brother. Hauntingly, investigators also found a sign on David's allotment shed that read, "Don't wind me up. I'm running out of places to hide the bodies." Both brothers were found guilty of murder and were behind bars by the next Christmas, where they're expected to serve out 30-year sentences. This is the case of Bruce Pardo, dressed as Santa and massacring his ex-wife's family. On Christmas Eve in 2008, Bruce Pardo donned a Santa Claus suit, got into his rental car, and drove to Covina, California, where his ex-wife, Sylvia, and her family were having a Christmas party. But Pardo wasn't there to join the festivities. He was there to kill. As NBC News reported, Pardo had been prepping for the massacre for months. That July, he bought ammunition and started building a fuel spraying device. In September, he ordered a Santa Claus suit, and in December, just 6 days after he and Sylvia finalized their divorce, Pardo drove to his ex-wife's parents' house and put his plan into action. When his wife's 8-year-old niece, excited to see Santa, flung open the front door, Pardo shot her in the face. He entered the home and massacred Sylvia's entire family, including Sylvia, her parents, her 2 brothers and their wives, her sister, and her 17-year-old nephew. I have a feeling I know who it is. One of Sylvia's sisters who managed to escape Pardo's rampage said when she called 911, identifying Pardo. She told the reporter, "They're going through a divorce right now." But Bruce Pardo's massacre didn't go entirely to plan. When the fuel from his spraying device unexpectedly ignited, he was burned so severely that his Santa suit fused to his skin. Pardo fled to his brother's empty home, where he fatally shot himself. Investigators then chillingly discovered that Pardo had planned more than one Christmas murder. Not only had he massacred his ex-wife's family, but he left one of his 2 rental cars booby-trapped near his brother's home, with the other parked outside the home of his ex-wife's divorce attorney. The Christmas murder of Christy Bamu. In 2010, 15-year-old Christy Bamu traveled from Paris to London with 4 of his siblings to spend the holidays with his older sister, Magali, and her partner, Eric. But instead of celebrating the holidays with Christy and the others, Magali and Eric accused the siblings of being witches. That was the chair squeaking, I promise. Eric claimed, excuse me, my God. Christie and the others had brought kindoki, the word for witchcraft, in their native Democratic Republic of the Congo, into his East London home. He and Magali focused their attention on Christie in particular and accused him of casting spells. Though Christie denied doing so, Eric and Magali subjected the teenager to horrifying torture for days. They knocked out his teeth with a heavy bar and hammer, smashed ceramic floor tiles and bottles on his head, and used pliers to twist his ears. On Christmas Day, Eric and Magali put Christie in the bathtub for ritual cleansing, but the teenager was weak from torture and lack of food and water, and his siblings later told investigators that he begged to die before he slipped beneath the water and drowned. It was as if they were obsessed by witchcraft, Christie's sister Kelly later testified. They decided we had come there to kill them. Christie asked for forgiveness. He asked again and again. Magali did absolutely nothing. She didn't give a damn. She said we deserved it. Though Eric's attorneys argued that he suffered from mental health issues, a judge found both Eric and Magali guilty. For their Christmas murder, Eric was sentenced to a minimum of 30 years in prison, and Magali was sentenced to a minimum of 25 years in prison. How Ronald Gene Simmons massacred his entire family at Christmas. Ronald Gene Simmons planned a special surprise for his family during Christmas time in 1987. Then he methodically killed his wife, his children, and his grandchildren at their home in Dover, Arkansas, before embarking on an additional killing spree that targeted strangers and his co-workers. Simmons, whose violence may have been incited by his wife's secret desire to divorce him, started killing on December 22nd when he shot his wife and oldest son and then strangled his 3-year-old granddaughter. He lay in wait for 4 more of his children to come home, then killed them as well by strangling them to death and drowning them in a rain barrel. 4 days passed, and then more members of Simmons' family walked straight into his web. On December 26th, he shot and killed his son and daughter-in-law and strangled their 20-month-old son. Then, when his daughter Sheila arrived, who Simmons may have molested, he killed her and her 2 children. But Simmons didn't end his Christmas murders there. On December 28th, he drove to nearby Russellville and continued to kill. He murdered a secretary at a law firm who may have rebuffed his advances, then shot and killed more people at an oil company, a convenience store, and at Woodline Motor Freight, his former workplace. All told, Simmons had killed 16 people. He surrendered to the police without a fight, but never explicitly stated why he decided to kill his family and so many others. Over the course of 2 trials in 1988 and 1989, Ronald Gene Simmons was found guilty of all 16 murders Anderson and the 2007 Carnation murders. Like Ronald Gene Simmons, Michelle Anderson used a family gathering on Christmas as a means to murder. On December 24th of 2007, Anderson and her boyfriend James McEnroe killed her parents, her brother and sister-in-law, and her brother's 2 children in Carnation, Washington. According to the Seattle Post-Intelligencer, the senior deputy prosecutor at Anderson's trial noted that she arrived at her parents' house armed, not only with guns, but also the trust of the people inside that home, and a hatred for the people inside that home. Anderson had planned the Christmas murders for weeks. She later claimed that she was driven to kill because her brother had allegedly failed to pay back a $40,000 loan. Not only had her parents allegedly taken his side, but they'd also asked her to start paying rent for the mobile home she kept on their property. On Christmas Eve, Anderson and McEnroe put their plan into action. They first killed Anderson's parents, then lay in wait for Anderson's brother, sister-in-law, and niece and nephew. When the family of 4 arrived, Anderson and McEnroe gunned them down. A harrowing 911 call placed by Anderson's sister-in-law Erica managed to record the family's final moments. According to the Seattle Times, Erica can be heard shouting, "Not the kids, no," before Anderson killed her 5-year-old daughter, and her 3-year-old son. Anderson and McEnroe returned to the property while police were conducting their investigation, and prompted the investigators' suspicion when they failed to ask about the family's welfare, or even why there were so many police at the house. Anderson later confessed to the murders, and she and McEnroe were both sentenced to life in prison. Oh, I'm sorry, guys. I don't know what that's all about. I'm not sure how loud that wasn't on camera, but it sounded loud as shit. The story of the Carnation murders, like so many other Christmas crimes on this list, shows that darkness can lurk even on the most joyful days of the year. Alright, on to our final case, guys. The murder of Sharon Idelot. On Christmas Eve 2013, 17-year-old William Idelot beat and stabbed his mother, Sharon, to death. He was arrested after her body was found with a knife sticking out of her eye socket, and he immediately confessed to the murder. 2.5 years later, Idelot was found not guilty by reason of insanity. According to his psychiatrist, William suffered from schizophrenia, and he believed he was doing the right thing by obeying auditory hallucinations that were commanding him to kill his mother. Since it was determined that he would be a danger to the public if released, he was involuntarily committed to a secure state this evening, wishing you all the health and happiness for the holiday season, no matter what kind of holiday you celebrate. Thank you again so much